The I that is doing the philosophy is an individual that is aware of his universality and becomes more and more aware of his universality. If you do philosophy, you go beyond your personal characteristics that separate you from other individuals. You go beyond your own individuality toward, not to something other than yourself, but to the universal that is within you. You discover the rationality of humanity that is already at work in you. Because you learned a language and are part of a culture and can reason about your own existence, and because you are self-aware, the universality of our being human is effective in you, is a reality within you. If you think like Hegel and I think like Hegel, or rather if you think and I think, then we are completely one. We are exercising something that stresses our deep inner unity. Okay, is that clear enough, or am I making it too complex now?
No, just another question just related to that one. Because I know in German, or in, I don't know, maybe in your language, it's the same Geist, yeah, the word.
Yeah.
So is this like this confusing senses because the word spirit, which is translated to in English, or even in German, Geist has the same confusing meaning?
They're indeed very problematic. Geist in German and in Dutch is derived from ghost, and it's a German word, whereas the word spirit comes from the Latin spirare, which means to breathe out. So because of this connection between Geist and ghost, in English, people don't like the word spirit. I mean, you can say a spirit. That's some kind of immaterial being out there. So to translate it as the phenomenology of spirit is a bit problematic. Now, when they talk about philosophy of mind, or phenomenology of mind, that's a problem too. That's because in English philosophy of mind is about the individual mind. It's about my psyche, my personal, I mean, they don't see the universality in that. The word mind would need an extra word, and the universal mind to express that. So you have a problem here. How to translate that? English doesn't lend itself to this kind of speculative thought. And that has been a problem all along. English language is very much empiricist by nature. And that's because empiricism, I mean, that's the reason that empiricism flourished so well in the English-speaking world. German is much more like Greek, the Greek language, which is very much suited to philosophical thought and speculative thought, and French is somewhere in between, being derived from Latin. And language is important. Language allows you to think something, or maybe bars you, prevents you from thinking something. So we have this enormous problem of translation between German philosophy and English philosophy.
So Geist in German, what's the meaning of Geist in German? You said it comes from, it's almost the same as ghost. So, because what I understand from the English, ghost is this.
No, the English ghost comes from Geist. That's the point. And the word spirit comes from a Latin word and means something different. If you ask it like that, what is the meaning of Geist? You can answer that on two levels. One level says, okay, Geist means something like spirit or universal mind. I give you let's say, a translation that will do for the moment. The second way that is Hegel's way, of telling you what is the meaning of Geist, that is to write the phenomenology of Geist. The the meaning of the word lies in the translation or its direct references. How do you use the word? But the meaning of the concept of Geist, lies in the entire exposition, lies in the entire philosophy. So the best thing to do is to understand, let's say, Geist is not spirit, it's not mind, it's not universal mind, it isn't anything yet. It's like the x, the variable that we need to figure out. Like when you're doing mathematics, right? You have a variable, you have an x that you need to determine what it is, and that you can only do that by solving the entire equation. Reading the phenomenology is like solving the equation, and then you come up with a result. After the whole of the phenomenology, you won't be asking what does he mean by Geist, because you already know, because you have traversed his whole lengthy definition of it. And I mean, if someone asks you, what is the end result of something like this? If you give, let's say, there's this wonderful movie in which we have a computer who has to solve the riddle of the meaning of life, the meaning of the universe. And then that computer is thinking for 10 million years, and he says, well, I can't solve the problem, we need another computer, I will build that computer, it will take me 100 million years, and then he will figure it out in the next 100 million years. So there is this race that builds the computer, and the computer is thinking and doing its, whatever a computer does. And then at the end of the second 100 million years, there is this elated set of scholars from that race that comes to the computer, and it says, well, what is the meaning of life? Can you please tell us the answer? The computer says, yes, 43. And then they say, I don't understand the answer. Yeah, that's because you don't understand the question. If you can understand the question, you know that 43 is the correct answer. Well, tell us then what is the meaning of the question. Okay, that will take another 100 million years, it says. So if you say to someone, well, what is Hegel's philosophy about? Well, it's about establishing that the absolute is spirit. Okay. That's a slogan, that's a phrase. It means nothing. But that's exactly what it does.
I understand that. That's why I'm waiting to just finish phenomenology and have a grasp of this concept, the whole Geist. What is it? But
sure.
What I'm asking now is because that's the language, okay? And Hegel used the word that people use in daily basis.
Yes, so, surely.
So yeah. What I'm asking here is, when like German people or Dutch people in daily basis, they use this word, what they mean?
Intelligence, understanding, the intellect. And of course they will use it for, in a more or less religious context, as the effective, intelligent power of God. So how God affects himself or realizes himself in our world beyond matter, beyond energy. The point is not so much where is Geist or what is Geist. The point is what isn't really Geist. What would be excluded from the concept of Geist. And as I told you before, every reality that I point at and talk about is shaped by my own understanding and by the concepts that I use, and because it's in a relationship with human intellect. So there is no reality that I can point to and say, well, that obviously is not Geist. So Geist becomes a totalitarian concept in a specific sense. It's a word that encompasses everything. Just like the word being, but being has no content, doesn't refer to any content. If I use the word, let's do it like this. You can have several words expressing the totality, everything that is, the cosmos. Now, if I use the word cosmos, what do I mean? I mean simply everything that is there materially. if I use the word totality, well, that's a formal word. It simply means that I'm not excluding something. What if I use the word being? Well, I'm simply referring to the fact that it is, no matter what it is, no matter what it is. I'm not saying anything about that. If I'm using, however, the word Geist, I mean something that is self-relating. Self-relating. Geist has the connotation of being aware of itself, being self-conscious. It isn't simply self-consciousness, but it is not something else than self-consciousness. I mean, being doesn't imply self-consciousness, but Geist does. So if I use that word for the totality, you can know that I'm an idealist, that I want to show that the intellect isn't something that is outside of reality, that's merely observing reality. No, it's part of what reality is and what makes reality into reality. Reality has to be such that the intellect is a necessary product of it, as if that reality has this inner dynamic to become self-aware. Now, where does it become self-aware, and when does it become self-aware? Well, within us as human beings, during the whole lifespan of humanity. Maybe we're gone after a while, and then the world, the totality of reality, doesn't have any self-awareness anymore, but at least it had such a thing in the past. But that all of that is part of the word Geist, in distinction to words like being, or the totality, or the cosmos, or the universe, or all of that doesn't contain this idea of self-awareness, self-relatedness. It's part of the Hegelian method to prove and to show at each level, because we're not interested only in what he means by spirit. We will figure that out at the end. But all these steps in between. What does being mean? What does it mean to be aware? What does society mean? What are our rights? What are duties? All of that comes into sight, into our focus of our attention when we move along. So Geist then becomes for us simply a word that refers to the end result of philosophy, while we're still at the beginning. After all, we're reading the preface. So we need to get there. It works maybe a bit like a hunch that you can have. You start an inquiry and you have a hunch, idea of what it might be that you will find. But you're not going to be too focused on that. You're going to focus on the inquiry at hand, the steps that you need to take. And then only at the end you can say, well, my hunch was right. Look, I found what I thought I was finding. But that's how it functions. So everything that we will discuss is Geist, part of Geist, an attempt to express what is Geist. Every stage in the phenomenology is a position, a statement, a way of being conscious that claims to be the whole of reality, that claims to be the full expression of what that totality is. Now, the first thing that we will encounter is the position, consciousness, Hegel calls that the position that everything is being. That being is the universal word to describe reality as such. That's an attempt to define Geist, so to speak, to define the totality. What is the totality? Well, the first person, the first position we will examine, that is someone who says, well, it's being. What do you mean by being? I mean just being. Can you give an example of being? Oh yes, this is, and that is, and that is. What do you mean by that? Well, that it is there. Okay. Let's take another example. Let's say it's 5 o'clock. Oh yeah, that's being too. But now it's 5:10. What happened to your truth now? Oh, it's gone. There's a new truth now. It's 5:10. So is reality still being? No, it's not just being, because if I say it's 5 o'clock and it is 10 past 5, that being has gone. There's no stability in that being of mine. So I have to shift my attention to something else, and that is my perception of being. My perception of being now becomes the truth. That's the second step. It all depends on who I am, what I'm thinking. Can we hold that? No, we can't. There is a problem with that as well. And that's how we move from one position to the other, to the next, to the next, to the next, until we reach the full expression of truth that we cannot transcend to a better one. That's the way it works. So we're going to discover in the Phenomenology a whole series of definitions derived one from the other, the definitions of the absolute or the definitions of spirit. Everything that you might think of when I ask you the question. Now, explain to me in one word, what is reality as a whole? Now, you start thinking, you say, well, that it is real. Okay, then we're in the 4th chapter of the Phenomenology, and there's a problem with that as well. See, every time I use a concept to describe the whole of reality and I leave something out, something is not expressed in there, I have a problem. Because I claim to have a word that gives us the meaning of reality as a whole. And now you say to me, well, in that concept of yours, this and that and this and that is not included. Well, then it's no longer an adequate concept of the whole of reality. In the concept of being, what is not included in the concept of being? Non-being, nothing. Which actually is something, up to a point. But I leave out the nothing. There is only being for a human being that also knows about what it means to have nothing. Nothing and being belong to each other. They define each other. Being is not being. And not being is the negation of being. There is thought in there. Being is not simply reality. Being is a concept that I use, and in that concept there is a reference to its opposite. Well, Hegel will show that, and especially what I tell you now, he will explain that in the logic, so we're not too much concerned with it. But that's the idea. I come up with a definition of reality. Or Hegel encounters someone who has a definition of reality, and he starts this dialogue. And the dialogue is, are you sure that this is everything that you can say about that whole of reality? Is this concept sufficient to capture the whole? And then he will figure out that there's something still missing, and if it's missing, then the dialectical engine will move us forward to the next one, to the better concept that does include the thing that is excluded. And then we find something else that is excluded, and then we move on again until we find a concept that is so rich and so full, because it contains everything that went before it, that we can say, well, now we have a concept that truly expresses the whole of reality. And that is Geist. All of this will seem very abstract for you, but that's because we are talking, let's say, in a non-philosophical way about it. Because I'm describing something instead of thinking it. I'm describing a thinking process. But as I said at the beginning, what Hegel does is invite you to become part of that thinking process and not just deal with the opinions that you might have about, well, where is he going? What is it all about? Like so, what you can find in a book on the history of philosophy is an opinion about what is going on here. But that's not philosophy. The histories of philosophy describe philosophy to give you some idea of what is going on. It's very useful, but it's not thought. It's not philosophy itself. And whenever I was teaching philosophy, my primary concern was that I had many people who were simply attending to figure out something about the history of philosophy, and very few students who were trying to become philosophers themselves and rethink Hegel. They wanted to describe Hegel. They wanted to be able to have a intelligent conversation about Hegel. Okay, good for you. That is, I told them, good for you if that is the only thing you want. But that's not the way I teach it. I teach it as an invitation to become part of his endeavor, to become a philosopher yourself. Even if you're just a philosopher in your spare time or some stages in your life, doesn't matter, but you have to get through the experience of doing philosophy to understand Hegel. Otherwise you merely have a description.